for a while, AC/DC disappeared from the streaming service. This is a long time ago. Like this is probably 15 years ago. And so my son and I listened to Back in Black together. It was just one of these, my son, who was 7 at the time. And so AC/DC disappeared, and it was replaced in the streaming services by this AC/DC cover band that managed to kind of game the system. So if you searched for Back in Black, their album came up and got played, and it kind of had a similar cover, and so I didn't notice. And I heard it, and it was just horrible because I couldn't, I know the voices of the actual singers that made the music. It's real to me. And my son was like, oh, this is the same thing. What do you mean, Dad? This is it. This is the music. And so for him, he didn't have the social connection to the artist, right, at his age. It was like a pretty, almost bit perfect Back in Black cover, right? But for me, it was utterly appalling. And I think, when we talk about art and creativity, we talk about the people that made it because that's really what matters to us. There's a connection, right? There's a connection to us. If we had AI that could make the 13th Beatles album, then it could make the 14th Beatles album. Then it could make the 114th Beatles album, et cetera, et cetera. And you have a kind of puzzle here. It's like, no, that's not what the Beatles are. They're a point in time. They're the 1960s and 1970s. They're my childhood. They're John and Paul and George and Ringo. And that matters a lot. I think that matters tremendously. I don't think that we should rule out a future where there are AI agents that we grow to appreciate and follow and that move the field and that appear on podcasts, with professors. But we're not there right now. And I think if we talk too long about creativity and leave behind the social part of art, we're really missing the point. We've been able to generate great images with AI for quite some time. What we haven't had is controllability. So the ability for a user to type in a prompt, for example, and actually get the image that they asked for. That is one of the major parts of the breakthrough that we've seen with transformer models and with diffusion models, this idea of controllability.
Perfect.
But that ability to express ourselves coupled with the power of AI is where we're seeing something interesting. So I want the AI to be really powerful and to do really cool things for me, but I've got to be able to control it somehow. Or otherwise, frankly, it just becomes pretty boring pretty fast.
Actually, in a lot of ways, the creativity remains in the human rather than in the AI alone.
Yes, but yes and. That doesn't mean that the technology doesn't matter, right? There's a marriage between the technology and the artist that is just incredibly important. And for me, as what I do is music. I don't claim to be a great musician because I'm not, so I'm well aligned. But that. I'm kind of addicted to the flow state that comes from improvising on piano or on guitar. And there's a point where you forget, cognitively, you forget that this piano's not you. Really, or the electric guitar, you forget that it's not you and it's this extension of you. And that is beautiful, right? That's technology giving rise to new forms of self-expression. And we're trying to get that with AI. At least I am. That's my goal, right? The goal is can we build a new way that you can take these ideas that are in your brain and get them out there.
Hey, that question of originality, is AI actually creating things that are original, or is it in some ways just mimicking what exists already?
I think it's allowing us to create something original. I think we have to admit that. Even though these models are trained on data from our world, I've often said, they are reflecting our world, but they're kind of like funhouse mirrors. So they're not reflecting our world perfectly with a perfectly flat plane, right? And in doing so, these funhouse mirrors can actually give rise to some very, very interesting new materials. And I think we have to admit that those materials are actually new and transformative and giving us new things to work with.
Do you have ways that you measure creativity in AI?
I mean, we can certainly measure we can use distance measures. The basic idea is to take you could do a pixel by pixel distance of an image and another image, and that might not
see how similar they are to one another, how far apart.
Then you realize the pixels might be scaled differently and things like that. So you move to more sophisticated measures. We can measure the distance from the training set and things like that. We can measure something called recitation, which is the model regurgitating chunks of the training set. So we have ways to do it. I think there's still, we still really need to rely upon human evaluation to understand this well. I mean, we're quite good at this, right? And machines end up being quite middling. They're not perfect at this, but I think we have ways to measure the distance from how novel the outputs are, for sure.
Okay, then, so I wanted to ask you actually, when AlphaGo happened, there was that very famous Move 37 where, in the match with Lisa Doll, which really shocked all the Go experts and the AI researchers, because it was, I think, really outside of traditional Go strategies. Has there been an equivalent like that in your field of creativity? Is there something where you're like, that is a moment of creativity which I'm really surprised by?
I haven't seen anything yet where I feel like there was this perfect and brilliant marriage of artist and AI. I've seen suggestive work, certain visual artists who are just generating stuff I really love. I'm sure there are lots of artists out there who are like, wait, I had my Move 37, here it is. I'd love to hear from them. But no, I think it's just tantalizingly close. I mean, my mind has been blown multiple times. My mind was blown the first time that I heard some of the music compositions done by Music Transformer, which is a project I was part of. Like, I felt like it was the first time we've heard a neural network able to make insanely interesting music.
How can this be used then? Because this goes beyond just creating pretty images.
I mean, absolutely. I think the major use case here does flow from the fact that these models learn something about the physical world. Models that can in one way or another learn about the physics of the world can be incredibly useful for scientific exploration, for simulation, and et cetera. So I think there's a whole scientific discovery directionality around this work. There's also the creative aspects, which we spent a lot of time talking about. Those are the two major areas that I see.
Because I think for a lot of people, this image generation, the video generation, even the music generation sort of feels like it's come very quickly from nowhere. But you have been dreaming about this for a long time.
Yeah, actually I have. So like some kids will talk about like professional soccer players will be like, I just was kicking a soccer ball from the time I was like 2, or like, I've been on ice skates. I was just kind of a weird kid. Like I was just like so fascinated by music. I grew up in the town is South Bend, Indiana, but it's, I grew up in a working class family, very happy, very proud of growing up in a working class family. We actually didn't have a lot of money, and I was asking for a piano, and I got a trumpet instead to do trumpet lessons because it was easier to rent a trumpet. It's true. But I remember I was even younger, 5 or 6 years old, my next door neighbors had a player piano. I mean, like, if you've never seen a player piano from the turn of the century, it has foot pedals that you pump back and forth, and those control bellows that send air through the system that then moves the air through a paper roll that has holes cut in it. And when the air is moved through the roll, when the roll has a hole in it, that causes the corresponding key to play. And I remember just asking my mom, can we go to Ed and Jean's house? I want to see the player piano. I was fascinated, like beyond, like kids' candy store, me, Doug, player piano, next door neighbor. It's almost bringing tears to my eyes to think about it now. So I have been thinking about the marriage of, I didn't even know it until people, like I brought this thought came to mind when you asked this question. It's like, yeah, I've been thinking about technology and the interplay between technology and music since I was like 5.
So what can you do then? Because of course, the training of these models is based on intellectual property that's created by humans. How can you sort of negotiate that issue?
So we're thinking about ways of identifying, watermarking, attributing the outputs of our models back to the creators. And this remains a very hard and open question, but where we want to be, we want to help build, new ways to compensate artists for their work. I think it's incredibly important to get this right. And we also want to make sure that we're using technologies like SynthID to watermark and make sure that we can identify this work as it moves through the ecosystem. I mean, I'm a musician. I have work up on SoundCloud. I won't tell you how to find it. Even though it's like 5 songs, like they're mine, right?
I think I found it already, actually. I actually did. Some of the AI music you did in lockdown.
Yeah.
I found it.
Okay,
I found it.
Like, I'm going to get 50 or I might get 100 hits after this is over, But like, I feel very strongly that we need to protect that, creative intellectual property ownership, right, of that work.
So what might that look like in future? Is it where you give royalties to people whose work is included in the models? I mean, how does it work?
So I think there's a couple ways to think about it. These are all like. So first, let me say, we're adding building blocks towards a solution, which is a protocol that allows a website to annotate what works are okay to train on for AI. And you know what? I'm fine if someone uses that to completely say nothing in my website is okay to train. It's totally cool with me, right?
Yeah.
Other people are going to want to be part of that. They're going to want to see their work show up there. So that's one thing. Then how do you take work and put it in the system in a way that makes it really clean and easy to do attribution? And that's the hard problem, right? So, one technology that's out there is called retrieval-based generation. So imagine what you have is a system that in general knows about the physics of the visual world. It's trained on licensed data. It's trained on, generic data. But now you're an artist with a very interesting and vivid visual style. Maybe we can retrieve your work. By that I mean your work is represented with your permission in some database that has some vectors of numbers that would allow us to use your style. That retrieval yields some vectors that we're attending to when we generate. And now we generate an image that is very clearly reflecting your style. Well, the attribution issues become quite simple now. We retrieved your work with your permission. We can annotate that image as being generated with your style, and then that opens the door for marketplaces. Yeah.
I mean, how do you, if it's suddenly you're lowering the barrier to entry to create music, to create art, to create literature, to, whatever it might be, how do you avoid the audience being flooded with junk?
Yeah. I already mentioned that if you can generate the 13th Beatles album, you can generate the millionth, right? So, I think one of the connectors here is back to people as artists connecting with people. I think we will start to trust, even if it's a curation issue, we'll start to trust certain curators in the same way that we love certain DJs who are doing more than curating, don't get me wrong. But, we have that. I think part of it is we just sort of limit the true explosion of materials that are out there. SynthID will give us, ways to identify these things as need be. But yeah, it's still a challenge, right? We're swimming in media.
What do you imagine is going to happen in generative AI in the next 5 years or so?
What I'm seeing happening is a move towards multimodality.
Video, image, music.
Exactly.
Word.
And I think in doing so, what we're doing now is we're figuring out the AI for single modality issues. Like I showed you some really cool images. I showed you some really cool, I think they were cool, some cool videos. But then you start adding audio. And what you see is if we can truly meld the visual and the audio in a generative way, such that people can tell the stories that are in their heads in different ways, we really do change things. And I think that's what'll happen in the next 5 years. We won't solve it in 5 years, I strongly believe, but we will start to just really creatively bring together these core chunks of technology. We'll start to see the combinations of text and images combined differently, and that will open up a whole bunch of new creative and expressive.
Do you think there will be a point where an AI can win an Oscar or a Pulitzer Prize or some great photography competition?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. The era of agents, that's the term we use to talk about an AI that has an identity, I guess, is upon us. The attribution problem is very interesting here, right? You have people that are quite creative that are doing the coding. You have people that are trying to decide what are the goals of the model, of the agent, et cetera. If you're talking about winning an Academy Award, the thought experiment is there's really no human involved. I type into the prompt, okay, agent, go win me an Academy Award, and I get a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah,
right?
I think that's really
what you're saying. That's really what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think we're very, 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 very far from that. And it could end up being one answer is, if we solve that, we may have solved AGI, right? Let's be real. It could be AGI hard with zero
external input, no
zero,
editing.
Just please go win me an Academy Award.
No curation.
That's right, zero. I think that feels societally like an insanely hard thing. And it's going to be a pretty cool agent that pulls it off.